But before I could kill him, we first had to land safely. Less than 2 years earlier, 4 people, 2 men and 2 women, had flown out of the Andrews Murphy Airport in a rented Cessna 172 similar to the one in which I had agreed to accompany crazy Captain Kangaroo. The party had become disoriented shortly after taking off into a heavy September fog. The plane had circled the airport at least once before stalling and falling towards the earth. The plane crashed into a nearby cornfield and exploded, killing all aboard and burning their bodies almost beyond recognition. Investigators from the NTSB and the FAA had agreed that pilot error was the probable cause of the fatal crash. What the aviation experts had not determined, and what was literally the $2 million question at stake here, was which of the 2 men had been actually flying the Cessna 172 at the time of the crash. One of the male victims, a prominent local physician, was the named insured on a life insurance policy that had an aviation exclusion rider. The rider explicitly denied death benefits if the insured died as a result of piloting an aircraft. Yet the doctor had a student pilot's license with VFR, visual flight rules, limitations that prohibited him from flying in heavy fog or cloud cover by himself, and thus having to rely upon the plane's instruments alone, instrument flight rules, or IFR. But the other man killed in the crash was a commercial aircraft certified pilot and IFR qualified. The beneficiary of the life insurance policy contended that it was the commercially certified pilot who was flying the plane. The good doctor was only a paying passenger on a private party commercial flight, and therefore death benefits should be paid. But there was more to it than that. The commercial pilot was the doctor's son-in-law. The doctor had brought his wife, the son-in-law had brought his. All 4 were bound for Roanoke Rapids on a plane the doctor had rented so that they could all marvel at his new home located there. And if those circumstances weren't confounding enough, the rented Cessna 172 had dual flight controls, like many such training aircraft have. It all added up all right. 2 pilots, plus 2 flight controls, plus 2 wives, still equaled 4 deaths. But none of it was clear. Was it truly a commercial flight, or a family sightseeing trip? Why would a doctor earn a student pilot's license, rent the plane in his name, load the plane with his wife and daughter and professional pilot son-in-law, and then fly in conditions for which he was not licensed? And why would a wealthy doctor with a wife and several children fly a plane at all without a life insurance policy that covered aviation activities? It was my job to determine, on behalf of the law firm representing the insurance company, who was actually flying the plane at the time of the crash. The stakes were high. If the insurance company denied coverage and was found to be in error, that is, to have acted in bad faith by denying the claim, they would be subject to treble damages, or 3 times the amount of the policy. But if reasonable doubt could be cast on the role of the son-in-law as the pilot, if it could be proven that the insured was actively controlling the plane at the time of the takeoff and had every intention of doing so prior to takeoff, then the named beneficiary on the life insurance policy would get nothing beyond the parental ashes. Right up until the time I agreed to let a lunatic take me flying, my investigation had been characterized by much deliberate thought and painstaking legwork. First, I had obtained and analyzed all relevant evidence pertaining to the crash site: accident site photos, autopsy photos and reports, statements from police officers and rescue workers, metallurgical and human impact studies correlating the damage to the human bodies with the damage to the instruments and structures within the plane's cockpit and cabin. If the results of my review of the crash site evidence were highly suggestive of the insured's role as the pilot of the aircraft, then the law firm would hire expensive expert witnesses to put the weight of their certified training and experience behind our assertions that the insured was indeed the pilot. But the post-impact position and condition of the victims' bodies confirmed nothing beyond the grisly certainty of their fate. The accident site witnesses I interviewed all shared a common horrific memory. The unplanned and unspeakable barbecue out in that foggy cornfield had forged indelible sensory impressions that they would not, could not deny. I spoke with the cops on the scene, the county coroner, first responders, and everyone else I could identify as being within a 1-mile radius of the crash site. They all told the same story. They used the same descriptions and invoked the same emotions in the telling. There was the throb and roar of the plane struggling unseen in the grainy mist, the anxious silence preceding the ground-shaking thud, then the concussion of the explosion ripping through the moist air like a sharp gust of wind that was felt as much as heard. They shared the same first impressions upon arriving at the crash site. Their litany of, "It looked like grilled chicken," or "smelled like roasted chicken and corn on the cob." This tended to derail any lunch plans I had on those days. The prospects were dim for forensic witnesses to save the day. Now it was up to me to slog through mountains of paperwork and locate interview scores of witnesses to puzzle over and possibly recreate the sum total of events that constituted the two men's respective last 30 days of life, in order to bring to light the identity of the pilot. I dove in and swam through the muddy torrent of it all. Flight logs, maintenance and service schedules, aviation fuel records and receipts, recorded and anecdotal accounts of the insured's flight history, including any previous incidents of minor crashes or unauthorized and uncharted flights. These could be suggestive of someone bent upon flying beyond their skill level. Written and oral plane rental agreements with the various plane owners, phone records, and the subsequent identification and interviewing of each and every individual the insured had called. Besides my tireless fascination with human puzzles, I had one other thing going for me throughout all of this. It is much easier to follow the tracks of dead people than live ones. You can keep up with their movements, and you don't have to chase down all the conflicting leads of their whereabouts. But the dead had all the good PR. All the good PR is in their favor, and insurance companies have none. The stigma coming off a contestable death benefit investigation can be detected hundreds of miles away. It rises off the most genial and bland cover letter. It gushes through the smallest telephone wires. It can never be masked. How many polite faces did harden and turn rocky with contempt? How many memories fled from my gentle inquiries? How many phone calls ended abruptly with syrupy southern voices suddenly clotted with righteousness and anger? He is with the Lord now, what difference could it possibly make? I won't speak any ill of the dead, and you should be ashamed of yourself for asking. He was a doctor and a good family man. He helped more people than any insurance man ever could or did. I can be just as hateful as you. How would you like it if a bunch of strangers poked around in your mama and daddy's affairs after they died so horribly? And then there was the money thing. In every contestable death benefit investigation, I became an evil minion of big insurance. I was perceived at best as some kind of twisted Robin Hood who was trying to take money from the good and give it back to the bad. There was no truth. There